Here we are in beautiful California, the state most well known for its earthquakes. Right now it is still, but what would happen if an earthquake were to unexpectedly hit?
On April 8, 1906, a devastating earthquake hit California's Bay Area. People believe that the earthquake was responsible for the thousands of lives lost. However, this is not the case.
Studies have proven that earthquakes don't kill people, buildings do. As Edward Gibbon once said, in these disasters the architect becomes the enemy of mankind. Earthquake disasters are as man-made as natural. Though it is possible the shock may induce a heart attack and kill dozens, you are more likely to die in an earthquake from a building that has fallen on top of you.
According to www.wired.com, in their article about buildings killing people opposed to the earthquake itself, an earthquake that hit Turkey relatively recently killed over 17,000 people. The earthquake registered as a 7.4 on the Richter scale, similar to the Loma Prieta earthquake that hit the Bay Area, but only killed 63 people. This is because California's building codes are very strict and ensure that people are safe from earthquakes.
Over the last centuries, building requirement codes have changed tremendously due to the knowledge we have received from natural disasters and how they affect buildings.
1905 marks the first attempts to unify codes on the national level. It got as far as to be on the National Board of Recommended National Building Codes. From this, we can infer that buildings built before 1905 had no code to follow, therefore making them highly dangerous.
In 1909, the State Tenement Housing Act was enacted in California, which was the first official public building law in the state. In 1933, another piece of legislation that mandated earthquake-resistant construction on public buildings was created in response to the Long Beach earthquake. It was called the Field Act.
By 1949, a panel was established to study the building codes issue, which was reported to the legislature. Years later, SB 952 proposed to create a board of building and safety to give sole authority to them to adapt building standards. In 1972, a Hospital Seismic Safety Act was established to respond to the 1971 earthquake in San Bernardino, in which many healthcare faculties collapsed, killing many.
Due to the San Francisco earthquake in 1989, in 1990 and on, adaptations were made to the already standing building codes. In addition, new and improved codes were added and a national building code had been drafted. Earthquake hazard maps were made and school teachers were trained in earthquake safety, just in case one were to hit unexpectedly.
The Building Act of 2004 was created to introduce provisions to improve likelihood of buildings withstanding earthquakes, to focus on buildings most vulnerable in these natural disasters, and to make buildings safer. The law was also changed with intentions of reducing the number of casualties if an earthquake were to hit. It was created from all the knowledge on past earthquakes and the effects they have on buildings. Above all, this act states that the landowners must have a policy when it comes to building structures to make them earthquake prone and to follow state requirements. This act is still in effect today.
The chances of surviving an earthquake depends highly on whether or not it is strong enough to collapse under the earthquake's great force. However, if parts do fail, it is also dependent on how much injury the failure will inflict on those inside the building.
To build safe houses, you must understand what causes them to collapse in the first place. The building must stand up under its own weight and against the downward force of gravity. For example, if you ever try to build a house of cards, it is difficult because gravity is always working against you.
In order for a building to stay standing, the gravity must be at the center of it, meaning that it has to be directly over some part of the area of its base to keep it centered. This is why it is easier to knock down a tall, thin object opposed to a short, fat one.
It is also important to understand that there are certain materials that should and should not be used in constructing buildings. For example, in an earthquake, more damage is likely to happen to a traditionally built house from adobe than a newly engineered building.
The basic requirements of buildings are as follows. To reinforce the walls, steel beams are used as cross bracings. The walls must be made of concrete with a steel bar in the middle, used to reduce the rocking. There are shock absorbers, or base isolators, to absorb the waves from the quake to reduce the damage to the building.
In It is important to understand that a building that is resistant to earthquakes does not mean it is earthquake-proof. The codes that have been developed from past earthquakes are made to try to prevent the structure from collapsing so it does not threaten the people in it. They are created to prevent as many deaths and casualties as possible.
Earthquakes in California, such as those from San Francisco, Long Beach, and San Fernando, have contributed to the current knowledge we have on how buildings should be built to be earthquake resistant. Meaning, if one were to hit, there would be less injuries than if the building followed no code. Every time a major earthquake hits, people did something about it. They put their brains together and took the knowledge from the most recent earthquake, combined it with the prior earthquakes, and were able to come up with the building codes in effect today.
If we did not have these building requirements in an earthquake, your house that looks like this could look like this within minutes.